Hello, Cardstack community. My name is Chrissy. I'm the founding director of the Cardstack project, coming to you from the land of the Web3. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Pastel Network's co-founder, Anthony Georgiades, to talk about the next generation NFT, not only in terms of use cases, but also a unique set of capability to bring together things that developers will bring together, but could it be provided by a lower level primitive so that every shares on what necessary to make NFT not only tradable, fun, permanent, but also in a way associated with intelligence and AI and other things that are so exciting in the world that we're in today. So thank you, Anthony, for joining this podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Well, so I'm really curious about kind of your journey to Web3, more specifically, like what make you want to work on this kind of next generation NFT thing. Is, as I was doing some research on your project, it's definitely not exactly what this current zeitgeist or current technology stack is, but there are elements that seems to be like the areas that people are thinking about, like permanent storage or like the kind of rarity stuff, or the ability to really like thinking about uniqueness in a new way and a new programming model, or maybe an old programming model, depends on how you look at it. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey into this space, and also what makes this project like your manifestation at this stage of the world?
Yeah, for sure. So let's see. I got involved from the space actually from really the lens of a developer. Started to write smart contracts very early on for a project called the Golem Network. This was back in 2016, 2017. Right around the time of the Ethereum ICO, was an open source contributor, and just quickly fell down the rabbit hole. Fell in love with the space. I was doing my grad degree in computer science, and it quickly became clear that Web3 time, really, cryptocurrencies and native digital token economies were going to disrupt and change everything. It was the very early innings of the internet. Back then was fascinating. I mean, everything was just, so new. Everything was very much so kind of research oriented, coming up with new consensus mechanisms, coming up with new crypto primitives of the nature and whatnot. You fast forward to today, it's exciting to see a lot of those early projects that have really found rock solid foundations across the ecosystem.
Right.
And so, one of the things, to your point, in terms of how I found myself here, I quickly fell in love with NFTs. I met the founder of Pastel at a conference. It must have been back in 2019. It was actually a kind of a Zcash meetup, or Z Classic meetup actually, and he really kind of introduced me to the world of NFTs for the first time. They weren't called non-fungible tokens back then per se. It was right around the time of the ERC 721 standard release. But, it quickly became clear that this concept of rare digital assets taking hold in blockchains was going to be a fundamental piece of the Web3 ecosystem moving forward. And the idea of Pastel was really born, out of this kind of concept of, if you looked at the ecosystem at the time, it was really kind of an L1, L2 race, more specifically tailored towards general purpose blockchains.
Right.
So for the audience, right, the Web3 stack is pretty much built as, you have kind of the layer one blockchains, also kind of the layer zero ecosystems, the Polkadot and the Cosmos of the world. Then you have kind of the layer twos and side chains. And then you might have off-chain services. And then it's obviously all the kind of dApps or layer threes on top as well. And then there's the interfaces, there's the aggregators, there's the APIs, right?
And the wallets, right?
The wallets, right? Yeah. The access points. But specifically kind of going back into L1s, there had been a lot of kind of innovation and disruption around general purpose blockchains, general purpose layer ones, the Solanas, the Ethereums, the Avalanches, right? Platforms programmable via smart contracts to support a variety of dApps or second layer blockchains, shared global infrastructure, right? Serving as the foundation for a wide range of decentralized computing applications.
And with the promise that these applications on the financial side, on the asset side, are interoperable because they run on the same kind of virtual machine or the same kind of state space.
Right. Or down the road, we would achieve some level of effective interoperability and kind of this multi-chain future, which is a huge thesis and is kind of the core of really what Pastel was born out of. But what do all those blockchains have in mind or kind of in common, right? There's a race for transactions per second. Very, 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 very high TPS. Very good for fungible tokens, which require little amounts in terms of storage, computation, or provisional resources, right?
Right.
So a lot of these general purpose blockchains, they're able to sacrifice the kind of storage or compute requirements in the name of basically being as fast as possible, right?
Right.
But when it comes,
It's like a race car. It's like, like as light as possible, as fast as possible, but carry one passengers and not very safe. Well, very safe for that one passenger.
Exactly. Exactly. And this works great for DeFi. This works great for financial transactions. This works great for, cross-border exchanges, remittances, and, the core crypto use cases, the core DeFi use cases. And obviously in the sense of, L2s, it works great to an extent. Now, when you kind of open up the world of really high data integrity type applications, a la NFTs, programs where maybe speed isn't as much of a necessity as is storage and computation, then that's where some of these blockchains, tend to fall short. So in the case of ERC 721, right, the standard is really built around this idea that this is a token that has been kind of, instantiated by a specific smart contract, and the individual NFT tokens, could be one of 10,000, whatever it is, has a kind of token URI field, which allows basically the creator to predictate, what is going to be represented by that NFT effectively. Where is that data going to be stored? What is embellished or embodied by that specific NFT? In the case of Bored Ape Yacht Clubs, you buy an NFT, you're effectively acquiring a token on Ethereum with a token URI field that basically points to IPFS, right?
Right.
In the case of FTX, they were pointing it to a server that they hosted on their own internally. So if you go buy that, if you go look at those NFTs, you're basically getting routed to the bankruptcy hearing website, right?
Right, like whatever, it's been seized by the government and the creditors and stuff like that. Yeah, no, the aspects of pointing to a server from an immutable blockchain seems somewhat oxymoronic, but that's where we are mostly.
Exactly, and that's the exact point that we have been looking to solve, right?
Right.
Basically, one of the core components of Pastel is this decentralized permanent storage layer. So you're not pointing to a centralized server, you're pointing to another completely permissionless peer-to-peer blockchain, right?
Right.
And that goes back to the crux of keeping everything within kind of the Web3 ecosystem. We're not reliant necessarily on Web2 tooling. You're not relying on Amazon Web Services.
Right,
you're not relying on a creator's, hosting. Even in the case of IPFS, right? And we actually have our storage layer called Cascade has a lot of the similar technologies in terms of how we leverage storage itself. And I can kind of explain the differences briefly. So
that'd be great.
Without getting too technical, within IPFS, data is stored on specific peers, right? Full copies of data are stored on specific peers. If a specific file is getting retrieved, the more often a file is getting retrieved, the more frequent or the higher the number of peers are that are, quote unquote, hosting or pinning that said file, right?
It's kind of like BitTorrent inspired by that. One may definitely look at it as like, the idea of seeding, keeping that original copy, but also peer if its access is just more popular and more available.
Right. And in the case of IPFS, peers are stored in Kademlia, a DHT algorithm. In the case of Pastel, peers are also stored in Kademlia, but more importantly, that what happens in Pastel's storage layer, right? So just back to IPFS for a second. A user uploads a file, it's hosted on any IPFS peer. And why is it decentralized? Because anyone in the world can run an IPFS peer and request that file, and it'll iterate through peers until it locates that file, right? But again, it's not guaranteed that a certain peer is going to be storing that file
for sure
for a certain given time, or for into perpetuity, right? And we're starting to see some link rods with respect to IPFS, or you're starting to see kind of performance issues where if there's some esoteric NFT that was minted and I go to the CID for, that to actually retrieve the file itself, it might take minutes or hours to actually retrieve the file because
it's like finding it in this like universe of a haystack, right?
Exactly. What Cascade does differently is in the Pastel network, we have our core blockchain, and it's really governed and operated by a set of validator nodes. We call them supernodes. And these supernodes are super high compute, very high intensity operators of the network, self-staked, etc. A user decides to upload a file to Pastel. Yeah. What happens is a registering supernode, in the most simple way to think about it, the supernode takes the file. Imagine it basically cuts it up into a bunch of different pieces.
Okay? Right. Yes.
And imagine that it runs those pieces through a photocopier to have kind of a level of redundancy. And then it randomly distributes all of those pieces to supernodes on the network itself. Okay. And so what's important is, whereas in case of IPFS, only certain peers host the file itself, case of Cascade, supernodes are holding distributed pieces of all files.
Yeah. Right. Popular or not popular is the pieces once it's chopped up is just part of the network and not, you can't like discriminate in Bored Ape versus some like new or old vintage collection.
Exactly. And we further solve some of those potential issues by a couple things. One is called kind of storage challenges and one is self-healing. So what happens is, every single block, a random set of supernodes is inspecting a random set of other supernodes and saying, hey, are you storing what you're supposed to be storing?
Right.
And if you're not, you'll get penalized, you'll get slashed, etc. Self-healing, building off of storage challenges, is a mechanism where, part of that process of storage challenges, we're also looking at the level of redundancy of those specific pieces or chunks that live in the network. Let's say a bunch of supernodes randomly go down, or let's say a bunch exit the system, or they're getting attacked, or whatever it is, right? What will happen is during that process, and without getting too technical, but we're able to actually kind of recreate those chunks that might be less redundant and restore them on the network. So there's this constant.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah. And so again,
it's a lost art actually. Erasure coding was something that when we were doing file sharing through other means with like Usenet, that you could lose a part. So like you have parity encoding, you have extra little bits of PAR files, and you can reconstruct the thing if that piece got lost. So I think we've went to a very precise universe of cloud where we assume that Dropbox or Google or Apple will keep every bit because you're paying them or they have a business model. But in the world of protocol, I think it's very, very smart to say, hey, something's going to get lost because, it's the world.
Yeah, exactly. So, when we partner with these projects, right, who are our kind of like, customers or whatever you want to call them, right? It could really be, layer ones, it could be L2s, it could be the dApps that live on top of them. We're doing an integration with a blockchain on the Polkadot ecosystem. Basically, their marketplaces, within that blockchain, when they're effectively, instantiating their version of the ERC 721 standard, they're able to call Pastel via this open API and also submit the data to get stored. Some of the marketplaces are actually hosting it on IPFS for this kind of like hot retrieval, as well as Cascade for that kind of permanent redundant backup.
Yeah. Yeah. So in a way, while there are a lot of NFT market type of application around the token trading, ownership, and transfer in these kind of more programmable general purpose blockchain, which actually benefit from its proximity and composability with tokens and values and payments and all this kind of stuff, maybe even loans and kind of borrowing. You're saying that focusing on the persistence aspects of it, kind of serving the purpose that a IPFS, and then we can talk a little bit about your comparison with Arweave, which is the ability to ensure that the storage of the actual content is there. So do you see yourself as complementary to other activity on Polygon, on the NFT marketplace? Do you see that the rest of your network is maybe competitive in some aspects on the trading side or on the ownership ledger side? What's your feeling on how you fit within the mindset of the whole NFT infrastructure ecosystem?
Definitely. So going back to kind of the initial thought of kind of general purpose, versus kind of application specific, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because of the network effects and the, user bases that exist in some of these ecosystems. And Ethereum has a tremendous footing with regards to just the developer mindshare, the developer activity, the apps that are getting built, users that are pouring into the platform. We're never competing with Ethereum. We're complementing Ethereum. We're complementing Polygon. We're complementing these ecosystems. And, I think that one of the biggest gaps right now there's been kind of this sort of vertical growth of layer ones, and let's solve some of the problems with layer twos, and let's build apps on top. A huge gap in the market, and even kind of from the investment side as well, an area that we really focus on is that application specific narrative, right? Purpose-built blockchains for specific mission critical needs: security, storage, data aggregation. These are blockchains that are highly optimized to operate really kind of single applications, or just provide well-defined resources. In the case of Cascade storage, they might be limited in terms of the agnostic functionality, and they're probably not suited to handle a broad range of applications, right? In the case of Pastel, we can store everything, right, if you want to, right? But there's a huge need and demand for kind of this kind of data storage. So you're not going to build a Uniswap on top of Pastel. It wouldn't make sense.
Right.
So, we know our strengths and weaknesses here. And obviously there's specific trade-offs that we've embarked on to really provide a very kind of special resource that, we think in 5 to 10 years will likely be commoditized. It's going to be table stakes.
Absolutely. It's really interesting to look at the overall concept of what NFT is, right? Everybody think of NFT as just like the record on chain, but it's also maybe proof of existence, maybe the ownership record, the metadata itself, the content, the persistent, the rendering, who is participating, the market around them, and the permission you get after that. So token gating. So I gave a talk about 2 years ago on what's an NFT, and I broke it down to like this 10 dimensions. And I've always used that kind of personally and share with the community as a way to like evaluate what keys are being evolved at what pace. Do you see the value of permanent storage is I think is kind of a table stake, like being able to know that the thing is going to be around for a long time and don't have this weird broken link stuff. In terms of the actual emerging kind of problems of having multiple ledgers and having the same work or derivative work minted like multiple times, right? Because you can recreate a blockchain record without recreating the asset themselves. Like people steal things as homage type of like a project everywhere, but there's downright theft in some other cases. Can you tell a little bit about, if you're dealing with this crotching infrastructure where the ownership ledger is in many places for network effects, and then the storage ledger is hopefully congregating a few of them, a solution where Cascade is one of them. How do you deal with this idea that when I'm buying something that looks like a Bored Ape, that I know that I'm buying a Bored Ape?
Yeah, definitely. It's fascinating, right? And it's something that's quickly emerging as a problem. Now, one thing to keep in mind too is that when you're buying a Bored Ape, first and foremost, we'll talk about this, and then I'll answer your specific question on art theft or copyright infringement and things like that.
Yeah.
Just one thing to kind of keep in mind as more of the kind of philosophical discussion as it pertains to NFTs. You're not buying a Bored Ape because you want that photo of that ape, right? You're buying that Bored Ape because it represents ownership as membership to this particular community, right? And again, that could be a picture of anything in this particular instance. But Yuga Labs has done a tremendous job cultivating and driving a community of individuals. And there's trillions, there's a ton of Bored Ape knockoffs. And
Right.
there's kind of a clear, discrepancy in price. Nobody's paying a dime for any
That's
of these
true.
fake knockoffs because they're not real. They're not part of that initial collection. They're not part of the smart contract that minted those, 10,000 original apes. And so they're worthless, right? It's the same as, I could have a picture of, the Mona Lisa in my apartment, but if it's not the real one, it looks the same, feels the same, acts the same, but it's not the same, right? One's worth 100 million, one's worth not even a dollar.
Right.
And so, that's one thing to really kind of keep in mind when it comes to really what it is at the core of NFTs, and specifically with this use case of community as membership, at least
Right.
from what we've seen today.
Yeah, I love the phrase ownership as membership because that's where it really manifests, right? Are you allowed to go to the rooftop party with the Bored Ape sponsorship, the Yuga Labs event, and that's very binary, yes or no, right?
Absolutely.
A knockoff ape not gonna get you in.
Now listen, that being said, there is the need for some of this, and I don't want to use the word censorship, right? Because, blockchains are censorship resistant, but some sort of kind of tooling to at least enable the potential collector, right? If I'm a creator and I do want to create a tremendous digital art, maybe I do want to have some level of certified rareness of the pixel pattern or whatever it might be that's connotated by this creation that I've developed. Because maybe a collector who's observing it is willing to pay more for this one of one piece of art if it is more rare than any other NFT that exists,
Yeah.
right? Not the case of collections of 10,000 or ownership as membership, but more in kind of the realm of digital art. We haven't really even seen these use cases emerge yet. But then beyond that, it gets even more fascinating because the use cases of NFTs are limitless, right? You have basically, gaming skins. You have basically financial products. You could have a collateralized, you could have effectively a securities agreement that exists as the NFT itself. You've even kind of seen a taste of that with Uniswap V3, where
Absolutely. The LP position is it's kind of like a contract just written,
exactly.
as a position of some terms like, parameters and numbers.
Exactly. Now imagine when things get more complicated and now effectively you're kind of putting more on chain. You're putting more data on chain. You're putting a deed of trust on chain and you're basically posting that as collateral. Literally a deed of trust to a physical apartment or home or whatever it might be.
Yes.
And then you kind of have this world of potential rehypothecation or overhypothecation where that same asset, that same piece of collateral is getting used and posted and as a loan on Solana, as a loan on Ethereum. And it's, well, wait a minute, how does that even work? So this kind of component of assessing the uniqueness or rareness of the data represented by an NFT is going to become a massive problem. And already is in the case of marketplaces. If I'm kind of a lay user and I spin up on OpenSea for the first time and, somebody advertises a new Bored Ape, I might get confused and buy it, right? And, it could be theft or scam, whatever it might be. If I'm a digital artist and somebody rips me off and creates this, copy of my unique one of one on Solana or whatever it might be, that's an issue, right? And so one of the other specific applications that Pastel has built, again, right, being very resource intensive, computationally intensive, and really kind of stemming off of this storage layer, is our near duplicate NFT detection protocol, which we call Sense. And Sense is a beast in terms of the level of complexity that goes into it. It's multiple convolutional neural networks that are running, and what we're effectively doing is we're taking a photo, or I'll use a simple kind of example again. We're effectively taking an NFT and we're converting that individual data by using a variety of deep learning algorithms into a fingerprint, right? So how do I start with a photo or any raw input abstract blob and convert it into a fingerprint that a computer can now effectively assess the similarity or dissimilarity between two fingerprints that almost mimics human perception, right?
Right.
And when you're dealing with, audio, it's fairly simple, right? When you're dealing with a text file, it's fairly simple. I can spot collateral that's posted as, XYZ in one document versus the other. But when you're dealing with an image or you're dealing with a video or things like that, it becomes very complex. And requires the use of deep learning methodologies, which is, what we've developed and is also what a lot of these supernodes are running. So again, you can't be a super fast, 1 million transactions per second and be able to solve these problems. You have to sacrifice maybe for some of that speed and have more integrity as it pertains to the ability to provide these robust computational problems. It's like you're chalking on ChatGPT. Takes, could take a couple of minutes to get a response.
For sure.
Right?
Yeah.
It's a massive trained model. The same thing goes here. And what's interesting too is, and you can go to sense demo, .pastel.network and play around with it. You can also go to, effectively Gateway, which I'll talk about in a second. But, sense is extremely powerful. Most platforms, we actually have a video on YouTube where we do a side-by-side of OpenSea's, duplicate detection protocol, which is really nothing more than some perceptual hash transformations.
Right.
And Sense, which is this robust AI-based model that enables us to really solve these complex problems in meaningful ways. We're not necessarily looking for, is this picture identical or was it maybe transformed a couple times? We're looking really at the deep level of relative rareness of photo, of the data, relative to anything else that might exist on both, blockchains where we're ingesting data from, NFTs or data that's been ingested on Sense, as well as on the internet itself. So it's fascinating. I mean, it's completely awesome. And, the team that's been working on it has definitely, spent a tremendous amount of time training, retraining, testing weights, modifying weights and optimizing for this, incredible piece of a system.
It's really interesting, right? Because you mentioned perception hash or p hash, and those were the early days where we were trying to just look at pictures and say, this is the same. And the neural net and the AI movement really is 3-generation acceleration, and then all the research that's going in and being shared, hopefully continue to be shared, is really accelerating the ability for people to leverage learning about what these kind of network can do. One of the insight that AI folks are looking at is that bigger models that are less specifics are better than the specific model. For example, the Codex protocol of OpenAI to generate code is now inferior to GPT-4, which includes programming language in their larger model as they train more things. And you mentioned a little multimodality that was interesting, right? Like, whether it's a text file or picture, video, or audio, image or audio. Are you guys aiming for a kind of multimodal protocol where any arbitrary asset, whether it's like a JSON of a options purchase agreement, or it could be a video of some clip of some certain things, or is it specific to the current use case of images? Are you guys optimizing the weights for one or the other? What's your sense of how that's going to evolve?
Yeah. So first, let's just quickly talk about Cascade, and then I'll mention Sense. Cascade is anything. It is an abstract blob. You could store a full game. You could store a full application.
Right.
You could store a tar file of whatever it is, a photo, a JPEG, a GIF, whatever it is. The way that Cascade works is it's at the end of the day, it's just, bits, right? And that's how we're effectively being able to achieve this problem of storage. One thing that's actually interesting too is the core of Cascade starts with a fountain algorithm called RaptorQ. It's an LT encoding technique and was actually really evolved out of Qualcomm. So a lot of the similar technologies that Cascade uses for storage is tangential to how telecommunication systems work with how do I share data on my phone? It could be anything, right? Any type of data. So anyway, don't need to go off on a tangent there. So Cascade is agnostic the way it's built to data type, abstract blobs. Sense, to your point, right? Generalized models are the worst in terms of being able to do anything. So there are specific models depending on the data type. So if you upload a static image or kind of a GIF type image, right, it's going to use one model versus if you upload a video versus if you upload a song
I
or
see.
audio file, right? And it's interesting because the video model is very similar to the photo model because at the end of the day, a video is just, tens of thousands or millions of still images.
Sequential images, yeah.
Right. And so it uses similar technology. Audio is a bit of a different beast itself. And then, if you talk about, once we kind of really start to see applications in the financial realm, which I actually think will benefit probably to the highest degree of this application, because it's, very simple to be able to look through a 50,000 page loan agreement and pick up certain pieces of collateral, for example, right?
Yeah.
And
The
so,
summarization of long legal document to identify the key aspects of it is pretty good now.
yeah, exactly. But, to your point, since those are different models, trained differently, different weightings, some of the core meat is the same, as I mentioned, across the different systems, but yeah, very, very much so specialized in terms of the type of data that's getting inputted to the system.
Mm-hmm. Do you foresee this sense mechanism to be gating the transfer of assets? Is it complementary and giving people almost like a Carfax report, and where you can just it doesn't stop you from buying a lemon car off the street from some guy wearing a baseball cap backwards. But how do you see this kind of not censorship, but this intelligence to be widened into the way the trading and NFTs is faster and faster every day. People really want to get in and out sometime quickly. From a temporal integration point of view, what's your sense?
Yeah. Sense is censorship resistant. Okay. There's no censorship that happens. I could upload a picture and then I'll turn around, I'll put an invisible change and I'll upload it again. And, the first one will have a 99% relative rareness score. The second will have a near zero relative rareness score. So it's providing the information based off of this, effective programmatic process. Now it's up to the user to discern what they want to do with that information. A user could be a marketplace, and this tool could effectively support their customer support team with takedown requests. They might say, hey, we're not going to let any image that comes up get registered on our marketplace if it has a score less than X percent. They can decide to do that. We're not going to make that decision for them. We're just going to give them the information required, and they're able to do whatever they want with those tools.
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing, which is that the data provider, in a way, is providing additional intelligence. Is up to the downstream, whether it's marketplace or even the wallet. Like a wallet would be, I'm not going to buy anything with a relative score of less than 3, right? Like that may be something I'm just preventing a scam attempt to on me, and I think using that information in the marketplace is important. Is there any way for this information to be available within smart contracts within the network, or is it something that has to be integrated as an API? Is there some sort of cross network your layer 1 blockchain and their data? How do you to leverage that information in the flow of the decentralized exchange of NFTs? Yeah,
absolutely. We're exploring a variety of means for this. If you look at the dApp level, it's the simplest right now. Quasi-centralized dApps are able to just basically, and if you think about it, it's still leveraging a completely decentralized network, and they might just access that network via a gateway API. The same 90% of Ethereum transactions happen via Infura or Alchemy or whatever it might be, right? These are all kind of centralized gateways. Yeah. So that's kind of what is happening in the near term with some of the dApps. Now, what's more important though is that with our, quote unquote partners, the players that we're working with, Avalanche and Polkadot, we're exploring basically more protocol level integrations. So for example, a Pastel parachain, right? That's really deployed and clustered by every single supernode, right? So supernodes are now operating this parachain, and they're able to really have basically the level of state transaction between those two networks symbiotically at any single point in time. And it's how a lot of kind of the bridges work in the Cosmos network. if you look at like injective protocol, if I'm running a validator node on injective, I'm running a full Ethereum node and I'm running a full injective node, right? That's, IBC enabled, right? And I
Yeah.
understand the state of transactions on both networks at the same time. And that's
Yeah.
enabled them to build, effectively one of the best trustless bridges that exists. So
Right.
it's a similar type of technology and protocol level integration. When you're dealing with NFTs, it's a little bit different or harder. So in the case of like injective, if I want to, basically swap between, Ethereum native and injective native INJ, I'm basically burning one, creating the other, right? And burning one, creating the other. And that's fine, right? There's no honeypot. There's no kind of bridge that's just, holding these and, wrapping and unwrapping, right? Which has resulted in a lot of the hacks and scams. It's a little bit different when it comes to NFTs when you might not necessarily feel comfortable burning the NFT and the state transactions associated with that specific NFT. It's
Yeah.
non-fungible, of course, right? So at the end
And the
of the day,
provenance is more important, right? Like, and you don't want to really light the history on fire.
exactly.
Not that it's been valued that way. I think when I first worked on the NFT project, I thought provenance would be more important. But now it's just membership, as the ownership and membership is still kind of what's driving the value of the thing. I do see that the intrinsic value of the NFT, especially as they move to try a financial instrument where it can do something. I'm not saying it's an executable NFT like a game. It's just that the NFT is part of an execution, and you need to present something, and that's starting to happen off-chain, like, token gated community, but seeing that move on-chain, influencing on-chain interaction, I think it intersects with a lot of problems of bridging and stuff like that. And I don't think the bridging infrastructure, bridging is a type of oracle. So let's broaden that as an oracle infrastructure is really quite there to deal with this across different types of probabilistic and kind of non-probabilistic chains. Like, Cosmo is good. They have their own finality. You can do certain type of bridges that seems magical too. But when you have probabilistic stuff on the Ethereum side or a similar network, it's just not as compatible as you would want, and that's the frustrating part. But I do see the problem being solved, and I do see the importance of getting the primitive right for things that like images and stuff like that, because we will use NFT for other things that look more and more like contracts that matters to people.
Absolutely. No, 100% spot on. And look, I'd be lying if I said that this was a solved problem. This is one of the bigger problems that we're working on and thinking about. And you have to be thoughtful about it as well. Because, really decentralization is hard. It's the hardest part of the Web3 ecosystem. Ethereum is never going to be as performant as Visa or MasterCard or, American Express or any brokerage account that exists, or basically the Nasdaq, right? It's never going to compete because it's
Right.
decentralized, right? Because it's reliant on a completely set of assumptions and input factors. But it's going to completely disrupt and change accessibility to certain assets, to certain economies, to certain resources. And that's the trade-off. And, in the case of basically achieving interoperability in a decentralized fashion, that's a hard problem. It's for a lot of applications, it's completely unsolved, and there's a lot of attempts at it. But it's exciting, and it's those are the types of challenges we want to be working on, and we want to be trying to figure out.
Yeah.
And it's the best part about it is we're as you said, even if we were kind of competing with one of these players, which we're not, right? We're very complementary to these ecosystems. There's so much collaboration in the Web3 ecosystem. It's incredible. You can call up effectively a quasi competitor and figure out a way to collaborate or
Right.
share resources on certain things. And everybody's trying to get to the same objective, over the long run. And that's, to me, what's the most kind of promising about it. It's not these teams or groups operating in isolation. At the end of the day, it literally is open source code. So
Yes.
it's super exciting.
Yeah, and I think one thing we need to, as a Web3 community, pat ourselves on the back is that we did invent a lot of primitives that looks like it's very sound and useful. Every single thing that has been battle tested, where there's even the idea of like tokens, the ideas of like a maker, like these things as they kind of go through more trials, or even wallets. It seems like better than the centralized alternative, right? Like having a wallet feels better than not knowing if you can access your Silicon Valley bank account over the weekend. And I know people personally who like were like, oh my God, I get this wallet thing now. It's like, yeah, you should have a key to move the funds that you have some control over. And that is really helping the whole ecosystem, because NFT or not, it hopefully shares in maybe not the exact cryptography and the exact curve they're using, but this idea that you should hold your own key, that assets are yours and you can do what you want to do with them. And there are rules, there's censorship resistance, but that doesn't mean that you can do illegal things. If the orchestration is just a beautiful emergent model that I think the internet was supposed to create. And it's worth working towards that.
100%. No question about it.
Awesome. Well, this has been really good. I think I'm really glad we were able to spend some time on the aspect of storage and that type of AI stuff. And obviously, a lot of things that happen in AI, and I'm sure we can talk another hour about generative AI as it has created that. But I think what's not been talked about is the use of AI or these kind of neural network for things other than hallucinating new type of things and kind of like repurposing artists, in aggregate insight. But really thinking about like there will be new creativity. Those creativity will include AI, but could we use AI to improve the human conditions of understanding that you're not going to get scammed, that you're going to be part of something that is a good membership, and that's not just about the proliferation of derivative work that nobody really cares about. So I think you're using AI in the right way. In that way, you should tell people you're working on an AI thing more so, because it's not super obvious with your layer one narrative that there's such an important and pivotal development going on within this project.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the Web3 ecosystem is filled with buzzwords. We've never really been that way. But I mean, yeah, it's probably definitely something that I guess now in the current hype train, people would definitely find maybe more compelling than they would have, a few months ago.
Yeah, I feel like the AI and blockchain sounds so incredible in the not credible. That is almost good for projects that's actually working on it to avoid the association for like random association of AI and blockchain algorithm. However, I do know in talking to people in the community that they really, really want to find something that's in that intersection, and some people who are actually working towards that goal and leveraging technology from a practical point of view. And it seems like you're doing so, and I'm really excited to see that continue to evolve, and for the blockchain ecosystem to benefit from the AI thing, which is really centralized right now. And if we can apply those technology in the research and understanding in a way that continue building towards a decentralized future versus open AI owning everything you ever done and Microsoft having all your data, that seems like a bad future for AI. So I always like application of AI in a decentralized way, and it seems like you do.
100%. 100%.
Awesome. Is there anything else you want to share with our community based on maybe things that's going to be announced or use cases that excites you in the horizon?
Yeah, I mean, it's we're releasing Monet 1.2, which is a new mainnet upgrade. We're live on testnet right now. We're doing kind of really the final iteration of testing and debugging, and it activates on the network. Cascade and Sense, all that stuff is live on the mainnet. But some of those things I talked about, storage challenges, self-healing, that all becomes activated with this upgrade, as well as some new optimization techniques around Sense, compression algorithms and things like that to really optimize and for performance and whatnot. So those are really exciting kind of updates we have. Two other things really quick. As I kind of mentioned, the gateway aspect. We're launching effectively we call it our API gateway. And it's effectively, we have like dedicated nodes that are running, effectively a centralized endpoint for some of these marketplaces and partners to tap into Sense and Cascade immediately with just an API, right? And
it's kind of like your Infura, right?
Exactly. Kind of like our Infura or Alchemy or whatever it might be. And that's super exciting because it just gets people up and running much faster.
Right.
You don't have to go run a full node or a full wallet node and figure out the infrastructure. It's just, hey, create an account, take your API key, and literally make requests, and they can just with a simple API key make a cascade request, make a sense request, upload
Nice.
10,000 images. They'll get back the transaction IDs. They can go and inspect it on the Explorer and see that it's actually working, right? And I think that's really important, just to get people to access this decentralized infrastructure as fast as possible.
Yep.
The last thing is we do have a consumer-facing application. It's kind of like an interesting use case. We call it it's called SmartMint. So if you go to smartmint.pastel.network, it's a no-code NFT minting platform, similar to Manifold or NiftyKit. And a user can effectively, with no code required, go and upload a photo or a collection of 10,000, deploy. They basically select, hey, I want to do this on Ethereum or Solana or Avalanche
Right.
or Binance Chain or Pastel, right? They upload their data. We deploy the smart contract for them, which they own 100%.
Right.
The problem with some of these, marketplaces is, you don't own the smart contract.
Yeah, you deploy their contract as a little like guest in their Airbnb.
Exactly. Literally, right? So this deploys custom smart contracts on their behalf that they completely own. But it's also an amazing use case because the data is getting stored on Cascade and is running through Sense. And that data, that metadata lives on the Ethereum token.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it reemphasized that the actual smart contract ledger NFT contract is really the commoditized bits. Most people just use Open Zeppelin contract or whatever equivalent on the network. Why have to have a developer do it? It's so standard. You can just kind of do it through a node to it. That's cool.
Exactly. Yeah, so we have a couple of updates to that, some new chains that we're supporting. That'll be coming out in the next few weeks as well. But yeah, for the listeners, definitely follow us on Twitter for the most up-to-date news and announcements, at Pastel Network. And, definitely it's an exciting time to be in the space.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you started right before the boom, and the second run of any new technology is the plateau of productivity. I feel like if we come back up from this bear market, maybe it has ended, maybe it hasn't. The attention and the thing will return. But the most important thing, I always say this, is that the builder keeps building, because that's the directional arrow, right? The technological progress is what we're working towards, and the reason we're so confident that we will get there. And thank you for the contribution that you and your team has done on this thing. You have introduced 2 or 3 of the most interesting, primitive, non-derivative, me too over here things. So kudos for doing the important work for moving the technology progress forward for what a decentralized economy and ownership system look like.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate it, Chris. And definitely thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. And with the community, we do this every 2 weeks to bring builders in the Web3 ecosystem to share their stories and what they're working on. And it's always exciting to see people who are truly passionate, like Anthony, on this project. And as always, thank you so much for the community support and your attention. Until next time, take care.